started. Madam City Clerk, if you take roll for us, please.
Patricia Coughlin.
Here.
John Counts.
Here.
Trish Haynes.
Here.
Bernie Jacques.
Here.
Rosemary Mills.
Here.
Ann Peachy.
Here.
And Sharon Spahn.
Here.
Thank you. This next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Need a motion?
Motion to approve.
I second it.
There you go.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Next item, is this for you, Ms. City Manager?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, it has been challenging at best, as you know, to get a meeting scheduled with the 7 of you. It has been equally challenging with a busy 7-member city council. We found several dates where we would have everybody but 1 or 2, et cetera. So I'm advancing the suggestion, nothing precludes a council member from appearing as a citizen, but the charter does talk about meeting with the council, and you would discuss having a meeting where they would be, the whole body would be present. The April 9th city council meeting, we anticipate to have what we call a full house, all 7 present. And I just was going to suggest to the committee that you maybe consider having a meeting immediately following the city council meeting, where you would just, it would be a meeting mainly to get feedback or have a dialogue with the city council. And you could limit your scope of your meeting that night if you wanted to, just to their input. More like, it would be a meeting, but it could be a workshop. Typically, the city council meetings are over, they start at 6:30. Recently, we've had very short meetings, but I would say we would schedule it for immediately following the council meeting, but not to start, say, before maybe 7 o'clock. The council meetings start at 6.
Yeah, but Patricia's out that week. She's on vacation. From
Okay,
the
and
8th.
and that may happen where we're going to have somebody out but I know that I've got all 7 council members here that can get, because the purpose is to give feedback. We would, of course, record the meeting and there'd be minutes of the meeting if in fact somebody, is there only one person that would not be able to make that?
Might as well. I fly out that evening to DC.
I would have a challenge
That
as
morning.
well. I'd probably be late, but
Okay. So,
I don't have a problem with it.
I don't know if we necessarily have to have all of us here, but if we just have a representative.
if the meeting was before the council meeting, would that help anybody? It wouldn't help anybody, okay. All right, so it's just totally up to you if you want to have a meeting. It's just an avenue for the city council to, as a group, provide thoughts, perhaps things that they've noticed. And like I said, nothing therein precludes them as individuals coming forward, but that would be their chance to dialogue in person as a group. So I leave that decision up to the board. Or you
It's
could just
okay with
pick.
me if only some of us go.
Yeah.
And then if you're going to record it, then they can tap into it when they get a chance.
Yeah. I would be able to attend.
I can be there.
I mean, if it's strictly as a, just feedback from council to say this is what, I mean, that's fine. I mean,
And you may make a decision that you would not, that any ideas that they maybe suggest that you bring back to be agenda'd at your next meeting. And therefore you would be able to, as an entire group, talk about it.
Yeah.
I think that
So
would
it'd be on the 22nd. That'd be fine, because that'd give 2 weeks for you guys, to whoever doesn't make it, to be able to look at the video. Get it uploaded.
And we would send you
then-
a link with the dialogue from that meeting.
I think that would be fine. If we have
That would be fine,
representatives there,
yeah.
then
We
they
got
can
the
get
4 of us
feedback
would be
and-
here. Yeah.
Would we have to have one of the 4 that will be in attendance, I guess, taking John's place?
Well, John wasn't able to make it. He said that may be challenging, but
Oh,
there's a
okay.
possibility he would be here.
Yeah, it would.
Oh, I'll volunteer.
Plan on that.
Not that complicated. It's
Yeah.
just a meeting.
I think probably whomever shows up that night, if Mr. Counts is not here, perhaps y'all would just designate a temporary chair.
Do we need to make that decision now?
Just for notice purposes, I would suggest that either by consensus or vote, you would just schedule a meeting for that date immediately following the city council meeting.
For April 10th.
It would be April 9th.
April 9th.
Yeah, but you said
It's a
the
Tuesday.
Meeting scheduled the following day.
No, immediately following, that night.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about, still about the business meeting,
Yes, sir.
following it. Okay.
I have a question. When is the next time that the council meets?
23rd, wasn't it?
And are there conflicts then, or what's going on the 23rd?
Well, nothing, but John wants to wrap this up by tonight, so I didn't think you wanted to wait that long.
Well,
I mean, Bernie, do you want to be present during that portion? Is that your desire?
yeah, because I mean, I feel like it's an important thing, you know, to have all the council members here, and
I don't know.
it's not something I would want to miss if we can avoid it. So.
Do you have one
See
down
if
there?
the city manager has
Okay,
some
I got one.
direction on that. Do you have a thought on the 23rd, city manager?
Let me just quickly see how that falls in your,
Good question.
No problem. Yeah, my only concern with that would just be, you know, we've had several meetings before then. And if there's a lot of things that come up at
But this
that
is for the
meeting,
CRC.
then we're like starting over.
Yeah, we would have a challenge, and we don't really only have one, maybe two more meetings following. So,
you would have a meeting the day before.
Excuse me, I'll interrupt for 1 second. I
Yeah,
just
Maria.
been notified that not everybody has their mic on. Could you please turn them on because the recording's not picking everything up?
This one's got a green
A
light.
little bit, because we can't.
If it's green, it's on.
And let me quickly call up the calendar for the city here.
oh, no, there you go.
There we go, okay.
Sorry. Yeah, I think the April 9th, as inconvenient as for some of us, myself included, would still probably be better because that still avails us to the April 22nd to take the feedback, if there is any from council, to be able to discuss for the April 22nd, May 6th, and possibly May 13th. Because I think the point taken is that if we wait till the 23rd, then we're at the tail end of it, and it may not provide us enough time to make any adjustments based on their feedback, if any are to be made. So that would just require some very copious notes from.
May I ask a question?
So,
But,
Is it possible that some of the council, even if it's most of the council, come to our April 1st meeting?
I believe we were down to having just one or two. No, we have two absent. We have two absent that day. And that would be Counselor Barnhorn will be in Tallahassee, and Counselor Burke will be out of state. And we have an executive session on April 2nd that Counselor Burke actually flies back into town April 1st. He will be present, but Barnhorn is going to participate via a conference call.
Can they submit what their suggestions are in writing?
They could.
right, I think, I mean, the burden should be, if we're meeting, I think we should avoid conflicts when we're not able to attend, and the council will conform to when they can meet when we meet. And since, you know, this is a committee, and so if we're going to set a committee meeting for ourselves, I think we should do our best to make sure that everybody can attend. Obviously, if something comes up after we set it, it's one thing, but to set a meeting where we know some people will not be able to make it, I don't think it's prudent. And we can find a middle ground where we can all make some meeting where it's early enough, and that's, you know.
And it's certainly your decision. You can just keep the April 1st and send an invitation to the council to attend. And that if they can't attend, please ask them to submit any suggestions in writing.
Right, and then we can review it then. I mean, they don't really need to be
Okay.
present.
I'll recommend doing that.
That's
A good
wonderful.
point, let's do that.
That
All
sounds
right.
great.
All right, moving on, any other,
Sound good to you?
Agree with Bernie.
anything else, Madam City Manager?
Just stick with the April 1st coming to the regular Charter Review Committee meeting.
Any other items? Madam City
No,
Manager?
that was just the scheduling
Just
of
that.
that was the
Okay.
only challenge because you had asked staff to go back and bring to you
Right. Gotcha.
response from the council. So.
Thank you very much. Next item is public comments. Do we have any public that would like to speak? Are you sure? What's that?
Did you have anybody come in your other meeting?
Bob Matthews was here, but he chose not to impart his wisdom with us either.
No lie. At this point.
It's to our,
At this point.
it's our loss. Okay.
At this-
At this, well, thank you. I look forward to that. That was sarcasm. Not really. Thank you, Roger. Okay.
We're being recorded, so.
Oh, yeah. So the next item is to review the city charter, and speaking with the city manager, and it was my thought also, is I think at this point, let's go through section by section, and we'll just start through, see where we get to. If there's any items of discussion, we'll go through that, and then refer, I'm quite sure, to our city attorney.
And Mr. Chairman and members, if there are any questions about procedures or practices, both Eric as the attorney and myself from an administrative side would be happy to answer those questions and as you deliberate possible changes.
Thank you. All right, so section 1.10, or 01, sorry, creation and powers. Any discussion or thoughts, amendments? We might get done tonight. All right, seeing none there. How about section 1.02, acquisition and use of property acquired by eminent domain? Any discussion? All right. All right, Article 2, corporate limits. Description, corporate limits, section 2.01. What's there? Questions, concerns? Yep, seeing none there. Moving along, Article 3, city council powers and composition, section 3.01. I know we do have some thoughts there, so let's open that up. Go ahead.
In the very last statement, it says, council members shall have been electors or residents of the city for 1 year prior to qualifying. My first question is, it does not state immediately before qualifying, so you could have a case of somebody who's lived in the city for years, moved to Madeira Beach, and come back and run and said, I lived in the city for a year, I voted in the city for years, now I'm here to qualify. I think it needs to be more specific that it's not just prior to qualifying, but immediately, the year immediate to qualifying, or,
What about use the word current, like 1 year, current year prior to qualifying of sorts?
1 year continuous?
Prior to, but I think the attorney would wordsmith that.
Yeah,
You
and
know
then
what?
I
Yeah.
can present it to you and.
The other concern was, and I did not see this anywhere in here, it doesn't say that, unless this is covered by state law, it does not say that the person has to maintain residency once they are on council. Again, you don't want somebody who qualifies, joins
moves
council, and then
away.
moves out of the city, but still governs the city.
Good thing.
And that does happen in some communities.
Yep.
So to answer the question on state law, there is no statute that governs that, and there is case law that specifically deals with something very similar to this. In 2018, in Miami, it was Miami-Dade County. Their charter was very similar. It just said 1 year prior to being elected, and it was a qualifying requirement, not a residency requirement for sitting commissioners or council members. So the way that the charter reads right now, it would just be 1 year prior to qualifying, and there's no requirement for a sitting council member, and there's no state requirement for residency for a sitting council member.
Are we able to implement that recommendation despite the fact that the state says, no, we still have home rule within our own city to?
For now.
Yes.
That's right.
So my recommendation would be to make the adjustments, as we mentioned, as far as the 1 year prior, and also to require the city council members individually maintain their residency during their term.
Right.
Otherwise, forfeit their seat. I don't see any reason why and I'm shocked that that's still on there. I can't believe that hasn't been caught, quite honestly, but I'm glad that we're bringing this up. Does anyone have a dissenting opinion?
No.
Does anyone have any other discussion they would like? Does that, the city attorney, is that, you understand where we're going, what we're looking for?
Right, so you would like to make sure that the 1-year residency requirement prior to qualifying is the immediate year prior to qualifying, and that if elected, any sitting council members must retain their residency within the jurisdictional boundaries of the city of Seminole or forfeit their seat on the council.
Right.
Within the corporate limits, correct?
May I ask a question about that, John?
Yes.
I really don't know about any of the council members that are on the board now, and if that would affect them currently.
They're all residents of the city.
But I think I don't think there should be a grandfathering clause either. So if they go, we're not, that was when I was going, yeah, you know what I mean? So
I think it's always been understood, but it's never been written down.
Okay.
And so nobody has challenged it because our council members, to the best of my knowledge, have lived in the city. And I know that the 7 now do have legal residency and are electors in the city.
good point.
Now, it says here consisting of a mayor and 6 council members. Why wouldn't it just say 7 council members? The mayor runs as a mayor?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a separate electorate office.
Okay, because I think I would like to make a recommendation that it is 7 council members, and then the council members vote to have somebody chair as mayor for 1 year, and then it rotates through the council, so that there's not a.
That's, well,
That would change your,
Yeah,
almost
that would
effectively
change a lot.
change your form of government within the city.
that's a very,
That would almost be,
Monumental
you would
task.
change it, that would be different. It would change it almost to a commission, almost like a commission or a council-based one, that there would be no real executive head of government. I mean, I know what you're saying, that the council would then appoint someone to basically be the chairman.
Other than to chair the meeting.
Right, but
She just has 1 vote.
That is correct.
but that's
So there's no administrative benefit of sorts.
And if I can speak of forms of government, there's 2 council manager forms of government that I'm familiar with in Florida. One is a council manager form of government and you can call yourself a commission or a council. There've been charter changes to change it, but the power doesn't change whether you're a commission or a council. And some, I think what Ms. Peachy's saying, some councils are each elected and perhaps they have seats by districts or either all at large with numbered seats, and amongst themselves select whom they want to be the mayor for the year, and the mayor would have the powers as designated in your charter. The other type is a mayor that runs for that position, is the chair, has the powers in the charter, and is selected by the voters, but, as Ms. Peachy said, doesn't have any more power than others, except for there are signatory powers, where, the mayor is designated by the vote, and whether the mayor is appointed by the council or elected, whoever is mayor is the official signator on many things for the city. And that basically is the biggest power I think the mayor has in our city, is that a lot of times the council will authorize the mayor to execute an agreement or sign something. The federal government and the state government love for the mayor's signature to be on there because every city has a mayor, not every city has a city manager. Our charter allows me, upon designation of the council, to sign some things. But there are 2 different formats, and the mayor's duties does not change. It's how the mayor is selected that changes.
which we do right now with the vice mayor, and I see both sides of it. I'm not averse to looking at that, because kind of what you were saying on the city commission, it's slightly different. Because with the city commission, like you were saying, they're designated with certain departments, like when you're in charge of the police.
Well,
It would-
hard to
and
make
that-
it generic.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that depends on the town or the city, because some cities function the same as Seminole. They just call themselves a commission and not a council. But typically a commission-led form of government is that each
Or
commissioner is the head of an internal department within the city.
Where you have
Or geographical.
Where you have a stronger form of government, like
So,
Reddington Shores. for
Reddington
example.
Shores
is
has
an example.
commissioners that are head of different departments, and then Madeira Beach, they're elected on a district by district basis, and then the mayor is elected from the general electors of the city. So
And the mayor, I believe, is the keeper of the seal, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, so,
Well, the city clerk is in Seminole.
right, yeah, but she's authorized to sign.
The
under
signatory
she's a
seal of the city.
signator.
As
So,
city manager
also
said.
the mayor has a different compensation level, which means the council members, if they were to do that, would be selecting someone at a higher compensation level, which
Than themselves.
isn't great, it's like $4,000 more.
I'm not sure it's that much, but it's a little bit
It
more.
was like 90-something hundred, and I think the council members, unless they gave themselves a raise, like 5,600 and change or something. So, I guess, thoughts on, let's, I think it's probably a good topic of discussion to see, is that something, I can tell you, I can't say what I want to say because we're recording. It probably won't go over quite well with the city council and the mayor, but what are your all's thoughts on that proposal? As far as selecting a mayor via the city council?
Well, my interpretation was that the council is elected to run the city. The mayor is, while it has the ability to vote, is, administrative tasks, that type thing, or run the meetings, that type of thing, and they do vote. But to me, the system we have now is the one we've had and it works fine. I don't see why we would want to change it and then have to go through all the changes that go with it.
Well, just for clarification, the city manager actually runs the city. The city council and the mayor are the legislative arm of the
Yes, thank
city,
you.
which gives
Policymakers.
direction to the
Yes.
city manager. But I see what you're saying. But good point. I don't want to diminish your responsibility.
Runs the meetings.
Right, runs the meeting and then also is the one determining a lot of times what's on the agenda items and topics that could discuss.
Right, and does have the power, as you said, to call meetings.
Yeah, so, but thoughts on, any other thoughts on, I guess we can, oh, I'm sorry. I've been finding myself the vast majority of them. Okay, yeah.
I haven't been involved with the city in part of what's going on here. But it seems like if it is working, and unless there's a benefit to changing that, I think it probably works pretty well.
Right, and what brought this about? Why do you think this is necessary?
Power. Too much power, too much, and why the mayor makes more money. I thought they were all equal. I haven't been abreast of a lot of this for a long time. I just thought every council member got the same pay. And, if you're only running a gavel or running a meeting, it's no more commitment than any other city council person. So, I think, my thought is by shouldering all the responsibility and everybody has whoever sits on the council shares that role on a yearly basis, then it really does shift that no one person can just kind of take over because there's that's my personal opinion. I've seen it done where egos get involved, and I just think it just kind of keeps everybody in check by rotating that ultimate power in our little tiny town, so that's my personal opinion. And I've read some other towns and their charters recently, and I just said, well, this looks pretty interesting, and so that's been my thing, because I think we've had mayors that have always been mayor for a long time, and it seems like they don't get voted out. Nobody moves, it just gets stuck. So that was my ultimate feeling about this whole thing. It was just to share the responsibility and move power around.
As you do look at the charter, though, that the charter does say that the mayor is not given any more power. The vote doesn't count. Some cities, the mayor has a veto power. And I think that that's different, is that I think Eric can tell you legally, probably the signatory running the meeting is the difference between the mayor and a council member.
And at the end of the day, the mayor is still elected by the electorate of the city of Seminole, just like all the other council members. So putting the voting in the hands of the council to elect or appoint someone to be the mayor for a term, I think you're giving the power to the people to say, this is the person that's running for mayor, this is the person I want to have, be the face of the city, I guess. There's, in the charter, there's no more greater duties except for the few that the city manager has mentioned, but, that's completely up to you guys what you want to recommend to the council.
Mr. Chairman, you served on the council. Would you say there is something to the fact that the mayor controls the agenda that does elevate that power? I mean, did you find your experience, could other council members be silenced or diminished by simply running an agenda? Is there an issue there?
I didn't see that. I think we all had a voice in it. I can't speak to recent history, but I served I served with a few different mayors, and I didn't see a lot of that, honestly. I thought it was pretty well equally distributed. Everyone had a voice. Robert's rules of orders were adhered to most of the time, and I think that's the governing the governing outline to how the meeting should be run. It's when that deviates, and I don't want to get ahead of where I was going to recommend on Robert's rules of orders, but that's where I think the power of an individual running the meeting, it basically that equalizes it. Is that once we adhere to that, I think that kind of makes it. So I understand what you're saying. Hopefully, and it is very hard to unseat an incumbent, but hopefully the voters will do the right thing for us.
Well, I don't think we should give the council any more power. I mean, I think the people should have their say, just like in any election. And I think what's the purpose of us voting if we give the power only to the council to determine who the mayor is? I don't agree that we should do it that way.
I don't either.
All right. Anyone else? I guess at this point, we'll move on and leave it as is. Does anyone, Ann, are you good with that?
Yeah, I'm fine.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah, just, move it along.
But I like to know.
Just throwing ideas out.
And that's
No,
good.
It's like
it doesn't
throwing
matter if
dust
you're
at
okay
the
or
wall,
not,
see
we're
what
still gonna do
sticks.
it this way.
And
But
Mr. Chairman, if there is any consensus, then Erica would draft the language for you to consider at another meeting.
all righty.
Before we leave 3.01,
Yes.
other than what we've discussed with the residency during and, the year immediately prior to, are there any other qualifications
Yeah.
I think I said somewhere in here they have to be registered to vote, but are there any other qualifications?
Well, they have to complete their proper paperwork
Okay.
and qualify that by paying a filing fee or completing a petitions.
And the state elections law kicks in and takes
Yeah,
care
it's like a
of that.
percentage.
That
I think you have to do
changes
1% of
sometimes.
the voters, but other than that, that's pretty well standardized as far as a packet that candidates want to pick up from the city clerk. Okay. Any other items on 3.01?
Do we want to do consensus by section as far as?
3.02, election and terms. This is pretty standard, 3-year terms. Any thoughts on that?
I just wanted a clarification. I noticed in the second paragraph, it says, during the second business meeting in November. I'm assuming a business meeting can be a workshop, a council meeting, or anything of that nature?
The business meeting is not a workshop. The
Okay.
business meeting is the one of the 2 regular meetings each month. So
Okay.
that would be, unless the council has previously changed when that business meeting would be the 4th Tuesday of the month.
Okay. But then so November 4th is voting day. Typically, the council would have their next meeting when?
November 11th.
Well, it depends on when it falls. And the
Okay.
reason, I wasn't here, but I suspect the reason that date was pushed out was the charter does talk about that if there's a tie between, for example, if you have 2 seats open and there's a tie between seat 1 and 2, they both are elected. But if you have a tie between the second and third place, there has to be a runoff. So you have to contemplate worst case scenario, because all over Florida, every year, there's a runoff somewhere. And so if 2 and 3 tie, then there has to be a runoff before they could be seated. So I believe that that's probably why they pushed that out to be the last meeting in November. So in case your Tuesdays come up early in the month, that then you had time for the runoff. That's the only thing that I would surmise from that.
My only question was, because it says during the second business meeting, they will take the oath and elect a vice mayor. But then in 3.05, it says the council shall elect its vice mayor at the next regular council meeting after each annual election. So that could be the meeting right after the election, which would not be the second business meeting of the month. So there's a little,
It should be at the same time.
Right.
right, so I don't know how we need to change that so they coincide.
That would be our city attorney that will.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. Would you prefer it be later, to recommend that it be the later of the, whatever date it is? Okay.
Because then that covers both of them.
Because sometimes there's recounts. I've been on that one. That was fun.
I've played it for years and we've already had one.
I had one where I beat Bob Matthews, I think by 6 votes. That was a tough one. And Bob's a friend, so that one really was tough. Anyway, so yeah, that'd be good. Good point. Good catch. Good job.
And on the terms here, right, this is where you would have like a term, it
Yep.
says 3-year term. I'd like to see term limits, 2 terms.
The topic. So let's discuss that. Any thoughts on term limits? 2 terms, 3 terms, no terms?
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally a fan of term limits, and I will say, since being appointed to this committee, I've been very kind of grassroots focused, asking residents, what are their thoughts, and send me their emails, things they would like to see change. And the number one thing from a couple, not getting a floodgate of folks who are interested in this type of thing, but the people who have responded, number one thing is term limits. Just got an email today about that, so I think it's worth having a conversation, and to see what are the arguments against, and what why. I don't know. I mean, it seems to work in multiple jurisdictions for our state, our major cities here in the Bay Area, both Tampa and St. Pete. I just wanted to see what were in Clearwater as well.
And as a staff member, I would be remiss if I said that it does not work at the state level. It has been a horrible travesty because the bureaucrats run the place, not the people that are elected. And I can only speak to state level, that, if anybody suggests that it works at the state level, because you get somebody really good in office who gets tenure from your area, then they're gone before they can, help your area out, because they're basically always running for office. So the state level, I think that if you talk to any administrator in this state, they would say that that has not worked. And then you have to look back at your local jurisdiction from an administrative standpoint and just see, and you can certainly make that recommendation. But I remember the League of Cities when they were fighting the term limits for the state offices. Their comment was there's a term limit every time you run for office, because people will not reelect you if you're not doing your job. And so that has been an argument made. So I throw that out there for you, but I would take exception, because at the state level, as somebody who works with state agencies and state legislators, it has not been a process that has worked well.
Those are 2-year terms, correct?
In the state level?
The state
yeah,
house?
The house is, you can serve up to 8 years.
So that's
And
4 terms?
4
4
terms.
terms. And then the Senate, you can serve 2 4-year terms.
So 8 years regardless.
Right, that's your max is 8 years.
I've always, especially, when you see commercials about certain legislators who have celebrating their 50th year in office, I'm in a sense in favor of that. My only concern with term limits is if we were to say go with 2 and they're 3-year terms, that would be 6 years. I know there's been projects in the city of Seminole that have taken 10 years to do, or 11 years to do, which means the people who started would no longer be there, and you would have that, I know some of the, like, for example, one of the properties we purchased recently, the city purchased, they'd been trying to purchase this thing for 15 years, and it was nice to have counselors who had been here, who knew the specifics from the beginning, who were more informed to decide on this versus somebody who's like, well, that was before my time. That would be my concern with the term limits.
But at the same time, the term limit doesn't implement a term limit on city staff and a city manager who might have been there, during that time, and they can guide, and provide insight to a meeting for certain projects. I don't think, the elected officials need to necessarily be there. I mean, that goes towards a lot of different, levels of government where you vote on something today, it doesn't actually get completed, decades down the line.
But,
And so
yeah.
I think, so good staff people and career people, can kind of shepherd that aspect of it. But yeah, as far as, there is something to being an incumbent that does give you an advantage of being part of, the electoral process and so forth. And it does come with its benefits to be an incumbent. And I think opening up the system for others to engage in the process, I think that's a good thing, and it's very popular among people. You talk to the residents and citizens are very high on term limits. It's a way to limit government.
I think a lot of citizens just don't come to the meetings. They're too busy, too tired. They don't have the time, and I think just following the process and sometimes just listening to the rhetoric, you just don't want to come on a regular basis. I know that's been always my frustration is listening to the crap. It's like, come on already, let's move this along. To me, it's you run a town like a business because there's certain things that have to be done, certain things that have to be paid for. The money has to come in, the money has to go out. And then when you can have really good council members, and we've had several. Yes, okay, you want to see them stick around because they do such a good job. But then you have some that's like, oh, I've got to get rid of this
But
person.
that's where the
and then
voters
they keep
come
getting
in.
well, but sometimes they keep getting elected, and because sometimes people say, well, he seems like a nice person. She seems like a nice person, because not everybody has that opportunity to sit there and know that person on a daily basis, as a neighbor or a friend or a colleague. So, not that saying that the voters don't know what they're doing when they vote, but we do know that sometimes they just vote, I think I saw him somewhere or her somewhere, and it seems like a nice person, I'm going to vote for them.
And just the realistic advantages to the incumbency that would make somebody be even afraid to challenge somebody who's sitting or somebody in the community afraid to support their opponent because, they're involved in whatever. And they're like, why would I put my neck out on the line, even though if I think the other guy's better when this person's currently in office, and earned media. It's in an election fashion. If you're sitting up here in the dais, you propose something, you're going to get covered more than the guy who's not in office, who's trying to get his name in the paper and so forth. And so, there are just distinct advantages, realistically, while the voters do choose every election, that gives an incumbent an upper hand, especially one who's been here for many years. And so I think it's worth, examining.
If 2 terms is too short, go 3 terms, that's 9 years. It's a tiny town. The project shouldn't take that long.
My only other thing would be, how would this impact our current council? Would not the majority of them be already termed out?
Well, if you make a recommendation for term limits, you have to do an inactive date.
Okay.
And does it start at that date forward,
Mhm.
or does it incorporate time served? There are, and I would probably have to defer to the attorney more on that, but you would have to include in your recommendation something that would enact a time frame for those that are currently sitting.
So what's the thought on the, I guess I'd like to get a consensus on term limits in and of itself. And then we can nail down if that is a desire and how many terms. I have a thought in my mind, but want to see what who's in a dissenting opinion of term limits.
I'd have to do more research on it before I would decide yes, so I guess I would be a dissenting.
Well, here's some bad news. We don't have a lot of time to research.
I know, I understand that,
So
Well, the thing is that.
but I can research a lot.
you
Quick.
can before the next one.
And
Yes.
also consensus does not need to be unanimous,
I know.
so.
And,
Don't make my job harder.
But you can make it so that it is a subject matter at the next,
Mhm.
agenda. If there's something that
We can
you
do that.
really want to look into, you could ask staff to put that on the agenda for the next meeting and decide. A lot of times you're going to have items that somebody's going to go, I never really thought of that, but let's agenda it for the next meeting.
So the question is, and this was, I know they do it at the state level. What are there any other cities that we're aware of in the state of Florida that have term limits?
Some do, some don't.
I can tell you right now, the city of Tarpon Springs does.
How's that working for them?
Well, it's working pretty well. They've changed. The mayor just got reelected, but Mayor Archie termed out the 2 years or the last term before that. The council members it's staggered. So at any given time, you could have 2 seats open. This last election, they did have 2 seats open. One was unopposed, and it was a prior commissioner who termed out, came back. And then the other one was a sitting commissioner who had been reelected who lost her seat. So
How many terms are they restricted to?
mm,
We're going to get into, and if we get down this rabbit hole, so to speak, of, all right, we're going to do term limits and nobody runs, and everyone thinks that's never going to that can happen. Then we get into the selection, which we have gone on a couple different occasions of selecting a new council member. Gosh, I'll keep forgetting run, recorded, and that's been a real mess because it's been inconsistent and it has caused all kinds of problems. So that's what we're going to need to discuss as far as replacement. That's down the road, and to have a set procedure as to replacing an open seat. But anyway,
yeah, so Tarpons says that their term of office is 3 years, and they are termed out after 2 consecutive full terms. However, if they get appointed, they only get to serve for the balance of the 2 terms. So they don't get, like in the state legislature, there was recently an argument that a gentleman was appointed to the seat, and then he's now past his 8 years because he said, oh, that was just a partial term, it doesn't count. So that's not the case here with their city. And then they have a year of ineligibility. So
Right.
after you term out, there's a 1 year waiting period, and then you can come back in. So those are the types of things that, and I agree that there should be some provision that says, if the seat isn't filled, how does that get, does the commission then, or does the council then just find someone and appoint them?
Well, no, he's not talking about somebody not running. He's talking about if
Well,
somebody
both.
vacates a seat.
well, both,
Yeah.
because there could be an instance where they've
There's
turned
no-
out and then nobody runs.
Or they don't qualify
Or
for
they
whatever
don't
reason.
qualify, or we find out they didn't live in the city, even though they said they did. They had a house, but they don't really live there. But yeah, we've done applications, and we've done, I don't know if that one time years and years ago they did like straws, and it's been a real mess, a real dumpster fire. So we got to fix that.
And in addition to, I'm sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to say, is that the only city in Pinellas County?
No.
Oh, you just happen to know that?
I just happen to
Oh,
know that.
okay, okay.
Yeah, I know St. Petersburg does. Rick Baker was termed down and he came back to run after he did his consecutive terms. Tampa has term limits
Tampa
as well.
does.
Mayor Buckhorn
And-
has
and
gone
those are both
public.
strong mayor forms of government,
Right.
which is a lot
Different.
different.
But also Clearwater, which is not a strong form
Yeah.
of government, has
Right.
term limits as well.
Yeah,
So
they voted against that one.
And I think if you open it up to term limits for the city, I think people will say, oh, yeah, I'll run for 1 term. Let me give it a shot. Let me do something for the city. And it's an opportunity for other people to attempt to get in there. And it good or bad, because you're going to have good and you're going to have bad. It's just the nature of life. And I think it just opens it up to, the average person that thinks, oh, that person always gets in. I'm never going to run. Why should I waste my money? Why should I even try? And here it's an opportunity for other people to get more involved, and it brings new ideas and new energy into a city and can always move it forward.
The
I
other,
will tell you, from a hiring perspective, where I hire and recruit department heads, and I have done what I will tell you is a superb job of getting excellent people, they are more likely to come to work for a city that doesn't have term limits, that's already stable, because they're not gonna come to a city that's not stable anyway. If they're not gonna leave a good job and come here. But I will tell you, and as somebody who looks for it, when I was applying for this job, I likely would not have applied had there been term limits. So you also, there is a side that you need to look at from an administrative position, that if you have a city that is known all over Florida for how well it operates, and like Ms. Peachy said, there probably, and in perceptions, there have been council members that have been super and council members that have been marginal over the years, and you get that with or without term limits. But I am telling you from, as a city manager recruiting staff, that is one of the things that professionals look at. Now, I'm not talking about just your staff, mid-level managers on down, but I'm talking about your upper rung managers that are responsible for whole departments. And if you talk to any 20 in the state of Florida randomly, I think that you would almost get 100% consensus that if you have a well-functioning community, that stability at the top is important. And I have personally never worked for a city that had term limits. And I've worked in Dade County, Palm Beach County, Polk County, and now Pinellas County. And it's just something that I would just challenge you to think about. I mean, it'll work. We've got wonderful people here, but I am telling you from a recruiting standpoint that would compromise perhaps the ability, all things considered equal, they have a job offer from a city that does and a city that doesn't, and they both are great cities. Which one are they going to go to?
And why is that? Why is that such a big
it's
factor?
the fact that the city council hasn't turned over, and there's a level of comfort that comes with the city manager and the department heads. So what happens is the longer the council members are on, they develop that relationship and that rapport, and they get to understand a better understanding or a better comprehension of what they do on a day-to-day basis. When you get someone new that comes on, it becomes a little more challenging for those department heads to reinvent themselves over and over again. So I get that part of it. I really do. I understand that.
And you've been sitting in the seat and understand the challenge of recruiting people, because we're competing with all these other cities.
In the city of Seminole is year over year, they receive awards for the financial and fiscal, I should say, soundness and the efficiency in which the city runs. The other part of that, if you go to a term limits, the FRS that becomes a vesting within the city council, is it 7 years? Or?
The legislature changed that when they were term limited, and I think it's 8 years now.
It's 8 years. So,
I'm not totally sure.
which
but I think
means
it's 8
that
years.
for that instance, and there's no point in having an FRS for the city council. And what that is, the Florida retirement system.
But you have to have it if you're in that program. All employees must be
Right,
on it.
which the city actually funds at no cost to the city council members, and they become vested after 8 years, which avails them to either take a pension at retirement or take a lump sum dollar amount at the tail end of their tenure. So
And you were here over 8 years, right?
yes, I was 10 years. I was a
Right.
4-term.
Yeah, and it's like your top 5 years at like $5,000 a year, so it's not, we're not talking
It
about a
was
lot of
almost
money.
nothing. I don't know, I'm ashamed to say how much I got when I left, but it is something, and it's very generous of the
Yes.
city to do so. But if you go to a term limit, that is a consideration, their FRS, which if you say you have to fund it, and there's no point in funding it if it's just going to be lost if they go to a 2-term, 6 years, if they had to be vested in 8 years, right?
Yeah, I believe it's 8, but that's something we could check.
Right. So that's just another consideration. I think my opinion would be to table this portion of the term limits, do some more thoughts and consideration of research, and also allow the city manager and the city attorney to maybe bring some other thoughts and facts and figures.
Right. I'll confirm the time
Vesting.
for vesting.
Any other, is that okay with everyone?
Yep.
Would you like to put it on the agenda or just leave it on the table? Agenda for the next meeting for discussion?
Well, I think we'll consider it under old business. Or other,
Okay.
yeah, I have a reason why I would want to.
So we'll put a old business instead of other,
Yes.
or other old business?
Yeah, there's a reason. I want city council digging into it, getting all worked up and anxious. They will. Okay,
Okay, old business. Do you want it just listed, or you just want to bring it up at the next
we'll just bring it
meeting?
up.
Okay.
Is that all right with
not
everyone?
listed.
You'll appreciate that later, trust me.
Okay, so this body will bring it up when you're ready to discuss it again.
Because here's the reality is if the city council, discusses or inquires on it, it's just a topic of discussion and it may or may not even come up at the next meeting we get together.
Okay.
It will.
Well, you have a lot you can bring it up at any meeting.
Right,
Yeah.
so okay. Any other thoughts or considerations for election and terms?
I will just
Mhm.
suggest to you that if you are thinking in favor of it, that you also be thinking about what those terms would be and how you would implement that.
Mhm.
Because if you do decide to go in that direction, you've got a concept now.
Mhm.
You have to put nuts and bolts with it
Right.
when you do the ordinance.
And real quick before we move on too, to just remember kind of, taking a step back, what our role is, we're simply recommending, and then it's going to go to the city council anyways. But basically what we're saying is that, that the voters get to choose, right?
We just wasted all our air.
Right, and so the voters, and if it goes to the city council, and we're just saying the voters should have a choice to choose whether or not they want term limits.
Absolutely.
It's not whether the merits, in fact, it diminishes the merits. It's like, do you think voters should decide whether or not their council should have term limits? And if we're talking about elections have consequences and voters get to choose, this is that mechanism, and voters will get to make that decision whether or not they want the term limits. So I think we should also remember that too as a backdrop.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bernie. Section 3.03, compensation expenses. Council determines the annual salary. I think they've only adjusted it once. Have they changed it since
They've
I left?
adjusted once since I've been here. The
Well, they-
mayor declined the increase, but the other 6 received a
They got a bump?
compensation.
Okay. All right, any thoughts on that? It's just very meager earnings that they get, I can assure you, but it's,
No one would run for office just to get that paycheck.
if they are, they got bigger problems. Okay, mayor, 3.04, shall be a mayor served, we discussed that, but any other thoughts on that before we move on? Okay. Vice mayor, we discussed that, moving that to a different portion or different date,
Yes,
okay? Any other thoughts on that?
so that would be the second business meeting
Of the
In November.
month?
in November.
Okay.
So that's the second thing she would need to do.
And 3.06, which is the prohibitions.
They don't have one on everything.
Any thoughts on that?
I have one.
Yes, well,
Okay.
Mhm.
Part B, it says interference with administration,
Mhm.
except for the purpose of inquiries and investigations, the council or its members shall deal with city officers and employees who are subject, through the city manager is pretty much what it says. Under 3.08, city clerk, it says that one of, keep the journal proceedings and perform such other duties as are assigned by the council. My understanding is the council can assign those. They can go to the city manager and say, we would like this done or whatever, but the city manager directs that? I mean, I interpret it two different ways.
So the city clerk is a charter officer,
Okay,
and so is not
I appoint the city clerk.
okay.
That was a change in the charter, the last charter amendment.
But she is a charter officer.
She was a charter officer appointed by the council prior to that.
No,
Then
she's
the
a charter
charter
officer.
made
for
it a
the
position
manager.
appointed by the city manager. It may be, I wasn't here and I'm looking around, were you on the last charter review committee? It may be that they just did not change this when they changed that the city manager, basically the city clerk is a department head now. like the finance director, et cetera. But there are certain duties that the charter says that whoever I appoint will do. But what apparently, or maybe didn't get changed, was showing that that also came out. Because if the council used to appoint, and basically whoever the city clerk was, basically to council direction, because they appointed her or him, and direction from the city manager, because the city manager was here every day. The Charter Review Committee recommended that it be changed, that that person be appointed by the city manager like every other department head. And chances are, like with some of the other things we're finding, that I can't speak for what the intent was, but if that person is to be like every other department head, they should not necessarily be assigned duties by the council.
Right.
The council would ask me to have them do it, or
Right.
a duty needs to be done, and then it would be my discretion at who to assign to do it. But the charter does spell out that the city clerk does do several things, which I agree that they should do, which is like the coordinate with the elections, keep the public records, hold the city seal, because when the mayor signs something, the city clerk seals it and witnesses it. So there are certain things that a city clerk does by virtue of this, but the supervision is with the city manager.
That changed a while ago because the city council was driving, not Anne Marie, was driving the city clerk nuts, because all of them would say, hey, I want this, I want that. And the city manager at the time, Frank Edmonds, was going crazy with it too. So they finally, wisely, I think I was part of it, we said, look, the city manager needs to actually be the one that directs the city clerk based on the city council's desires. And then that would be, and which made complete sense. I'm telling you, it was a real mess.
7 people dictating,
Right.
my personal secretary, it doesn't work.
That's what, a lot of them were using the city
Right.
clerk as their
So does this
secretary,
need to
and it
be
was nuts.
clarified,
I think
or
that
is
should
it
be.
If that's your
okay?
desire,
Yeah,
it
I
would
think
be
we
in
should.
keeping with the prior charter amendment, and I think it's just probably, they did not look at that section in tangent with the change, and the voters did approve it. But, that would be my only thought. And Ms. Peachy, were you on the Charter Review Committee
No.
when that happened? I know you served on a prior one. Didn't you
No,
serve on
I've
one?
never been on a charter review
I
committee, this
thought
is my
you-
first go-round.
Okay, then I guess you weren't on it. I thought you were on it.
Nope.
So I think we should make that correction.
Okay, so just from section 3.08 under city clerk, the third line says proceedings and perform such other duties as are signed by, and I can just strike out council and leave the remainder of the sentence.
Got it. Good catch.
Okay. We don't want to
And then the only other
dump
thing,
work on the poor clerk if it's not
on
necessary.
Part C at the top of the page, vacancy in council, a vacancy in the council shall be temporarily filled. Should it have the word filled in there? I think it's just like a,
Part C of which section?
oh, the same page we were on, it would be the section before.
Up the thing before you say
Page, whatever that is. It's
Oh.
It's section 3.06.
Okay, I see.
I'm not even sure
3.07.
you'd have to do a charter change.
3.07?
3.07.
I'm sorry, 3.07, at the top of the page, part C.
Vacancies, the official council shall not become vacant upon. yeah.
Temporarily filled. I think it's just an omission of a word.
And I
Temporarily.
believe Erica just said that you, if it's a Scrivener's error, you
It
would
doesn't
not
need
have
to go to referendum.
Okay, that's fine.
All right.
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Explaining that one.
Yeah. We left off the word filled. No.
And it may have been in there and just, when the ordinance was written, didn't get typed.
3.07, we got a little bit of that, vacancies, forfeitures. So, a lot of it straightforward.
Did we dispense with 3.06?
I thought we finished it. Did we finish it?
I know we jumped to 3.08, so I
Well,
wasn't
we
sure.
would, yeah, prohibitions. Did anyone else have anything on 306?
No, 3.07.
3.07, okay, 307.
6 is good.
Quick question, vacancy in the office of the mayor. It talks about if in the event the mayor is temporarily absent, the vice mayor will, at that point, you would have 6 people. So how does that impact votes of the city?
You still have to have 4.
Okay, that's all I wanted to
Yeah,
know.
a quorum is four.
Is that in state law understood? I mean, we don't have to have that in here, do we?
A quorum is,
You have to have a quorum in order to
Conduct business.
conduct business or.
Okay.
And I
Okay,
believe ordinances require 4 positive votes. Would that have to be in the
A
charter?
majority.
Not a, majority of those present, but four, even if there are four present. Does that,
That's not a state law, I don't believe, and it depends on what the ordinance is as well. My understanding is you only need a majority to pass an ordinance, unless otherwise it calls for a supermajority, or if your code determines otherwise.
I know that in some land use matters, it requires four positive
Correct.
votes, even if four.
It
four present.
depends on, right, if it's a land use change or sometimes a rezoning, things like that, depending upon either what the code says or what state law says.
So this charter would not have to address that?
No.
Okay.
And in fact, if this charter did address that, that would make it an affirmative vote of 4, and effectively making 4 a quorum. So, I mean, I don't know.
And four is a quorum.
Right, so it doesn't really do anything one way or the other.
Do we need to have a set procedure on how to fill a vacancy? Because right now it just says based on the city council. I don't know if that's either by application or by nomination.
My understanding past practices is that they decide the process when it happens.
Right. And therein lies
Yeah, but you would have been
the
into
making
one
of the
those, I
sausage,
haven't.
so to speak. Yeah,
It should be a process then.
there is a process, but as the city manager saying, it's determined based on who's ever on the city council, how they wish to,
Oh,
what
well,
that process will be.
I would say then that should be changed then because
I
it
think-
should be some kind of standard. I mean, if you've got a vacancy, like you said, you either go by what, nomination or hold a special election?
Or whoever came in, and some do it next,
So, yeah, most cities don't do that. This city used to do that, like
Mhm.
whoever came next in the election until they didn't want to appoint that person. But that had been a practice, my understanding is, but then you could require, and I will just throw this out, I'm just thinking that the city establish a process by resolution of
Mhm.
replacing.
Right.
So that it's in place in advance of it happening.
Right.
So personalities don't get involved with it. So that could the charter require them to have a resolution establishing a practice,
a standard practice, or?
standard practice?
That's a good question. Let me look that up,
I don't know the answer.
because I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
So are we talking a vacancy, like nobody runs for mayor?
No, or like
Someone
someone
dies, resigns.
Well, but
passes
isn't
away
that-
or resigns or
Well, the
moves
vice
away
mayor
or
becomes-
has some
Right,
kind of
that's
sudden
covered in
thing.
Part B.
Well, the vice, but then there's still an opening.
But then the vice mayor's position would be open, there would be a council member position open.
The domino.
Like Jimmy Johnson became unable to serve, and I believe Mayor Waters had been the vice mayor and moved
Right.
up. But I don't know the process that they used to fill her seat.
We did an application. We did applications and then we reviewed them and then did a nomination and we voted, which, the reason why, just to give you a little history, why we didn't go to the next in line, because someone was so unpalatable that they decided, we don't want that person on, we need to come up with a different, so it becomes inconsistencies, which I think opens the city up to other issues that may not be desirous
But the process you just described is the most typical one.
by
To
application.
solicit people who are interested and then just pick from that list.
Right. So we'll just see if there's any way we can, I don't think we have to have maybe that exact procedure in the charter, but maybe the council may want to entertain doing a resolution.
Well, we could throw this out to the council when they come to our meeting.
Yeah, we could try that. I'd be real glad to hear
Well,
about
as long as
term
you're here.
But it seems like they change the rules midstream, so we don't want to ask them because they'll just change the rules midstream. We want to get something that's fair
Mm-hmm.
and concrete. Until it doesn't work, then you change it.
Application process is pretty equitable. Because everyone has a chance to look at the applications and have a
You open
discussion.
it up because if you select the person who came in next in line, perhaps somebody wasn't interested in running at that time, but their life circumstances changed and they had the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right, then you
With
wouldn't,
their name in it, and, maybe they had not run because their best friend John Counts was running. But yet, when you were now out of the picture, they said, okay, I'll put my name in, so I'm just picking on you because you were on the
the
council.
might happen that way, I
application
don't know.
process actually probably sounds about the best.
So we
You know.
have a process I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's okay.
We have a process. If something happens with the mayor, the vice mayor moves up, and then somebody replaces the vice mayor, and we don't know exactly how that happens, the council votes amongst itself, much like they do, I guess, when they nominate a new vice mayor. What we're talking about, though, is what is the process to replace the new counselor
Right.
that is now needed?
Right.
Okay.
Because that would be a trickle down. Like you said, in Jimmy Johnson's instance,
Right.
Vice Mayor Waters took in, became mayor, and then now we had a council position because someone moved into the vice mayor. Okay, all right.
I did just see something under 307 Part B under forfeiture of office, subsection number 1. It says that a council member shall forfeit office at any time if they lack any time during the member's term any qualification for the office. So that kind of remedies that first section where we were talking about they have had to been electors for the year or a resident for the year. Obviously, we would still have to put in immediate, but at that time, it kind of rectifies the residency requirement. We can still suggest to add it, but it's kind of already in there by process of this
Yeah.
subsection
I kind
B1
of would like to add it personally. I'd like to make sure it's
in there.
because I think it opens to a loophole. Well, it's not there, but it's there. You know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I agree.
Any other thoughts on 307? All right. How about city clerk 308? We kind of went into that, but I think that one's pretty straightforward.
And the next page on the city clerk are the 4 things that the charter says that that person appointed by me would be responsible for. And that is typical of what city clerks are responsible for.
309, city attorney, appointment, removal, qualifications. Do we need a city attorney?
I wasn't messing
Yes.
with that one.
Do you need one?
Do we want one?
Well, okay, those are two different questions.
Do you need
Do you
one?
want one? Maybe not. Do you need one? Probably.
Yes.
Might be a good idea.
I'm always the bad guy in the room. I'm used to it. so.
I have some good attorneys I like.
That's why they sent the 2 of us together,
Yeah.
because we get to be
Yes.
the bad guys.
I get to tell you what you can't do.
Yes, no fun.
But we try to figure out how you can do
Mhm.
it. We do that too.
Really can do. On that.
We're devil's advocates sometimes.
310 procedure. Council should meet twice a month. Meetings may be held and call the city manager.
There's your quorum right there for.
Yep. And constitute a quorum of 4, which is a majority. Thoughts on that? Okay. Section 4.01, initiative. Qualified voters shall have the power to propose ordinance to the council, provided such power does not extend to the budget, blah, blah, blah. Any thoughts on that one? Okay. Move along to the qualified. Next one, 4.03, recall. Voters shall have the power to recall or remove from office any elected official for the reasons and manner set forth by the state. So basically, they break the law.
And the state law does give you a list of reasons by which a person can be recalled.
404, procedures. Any thoughts there? Alright, moving on, city manager now.
Do we need one?
I
No.
want one of those. We technically don't need one if we change our form of government, but I believe,
You went back to the strong mayor, you would.
All right.
I think over 90% of the cities, municipalities are in the form of government we have.
And what I
There's a
love
reason
is,
for that too.
is when you do that also, when you look at strong mayor forms of government, they all have a city administrator.
Mhm.
And many of my colleagues have, like Dan Clayman was Glenda Hood's in Orlando. I had a longtime friend that was the one in Tampa. He retired from there. St. Pete has one. So they do kind of shield it because it's a strong mayor, but you pay the strong mayor what you pay a city manager, and then they hire a city administrator making the same
Double
thing, so
the
you just
pay.
double your cost.
Right. Yeah, we don't need,
Yeah,
We don't need to
like
worry
double
about that. We're
pay.
good.
That's, no.
we did used to have to, I love the history lesson, we did have a strong mayor for quite a while. Holland Mangum was.
I still stumble onto some things and I'm going, how did that happen? And Mark Ely lists me as strong mayor form of government. I'm like,
rec center across the street costs a lot of city council people their jobs.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Anyway, thoughts on the city manager? Kind of know what she does.
Okay. It's all good.
No one's got the courage to stand up to me. That's okay. I will. Come on. Acting city manager.
Right now.
Any thoughts on that? Reaching by council, actually doesn't.
I think it's all good.
Powers and duties of the city manager. Basically runs the city.
Day-to-day operations. Don't set policy, carry it out.
Council gives the legislative direction, city manager carries it out. Okay.
An interesting thing too here is, I do have fiscal responsibilities that are spelled out in the charter, which I like because it makes it very clear that I submitted an itemized annual budget message, capital program, and in the form provided by ordinance. And of course, one of the things that Chairman Counts mentioned is that we're very proud of the transparency of our budget process. And we've been recognized for, I think, 17 consecutive years by the Government Finance Officers Association for that, starting with my predecessor and continuing through my tenure. So as a city, we're happy with that. And the city, when I was hired, made it very clear that finances and administration both are very important. And that's why the charter does require perhaps financial things you may not see in other charters. And I think it's a good thing.
We have probably one of the largest surpluses, which actually became a problem because we were keeping too much money as an emergency contingency fund. I mean, like 2 or 3 million we were keeping. It was something really high.
And you know, the legislature this past year, I get irritated with the legislature because of the home rule issues, is that they were wanting to really reduce our amount we could keep in reserves. And then Irma comes. And we have spent all that money, and do you know, we haven't gotten any money from FEMA yet back. So, you know, if we didn't have that, and the cities of Florida didn't have that, that would have been a travesty. So when we had Irma, you know, we didn't miss a beat here in the city. When we had the downturn of the economy, we didn't miss a beat because we had financing flexibility that kept us, and our millage rate never increased, so.
Well, buckle up. It's going to be another windy year, I think.
Please, no. I went through, in my previous job, I had 3, 2 months apart, Charlie, Francis, and Jean. I went over my community, all 3 of them. So it was, if I have one more hurricane in my career, it'll be too many.
All right. Supervision of departments. City manager, of course, runs all the departments.
And that does conform with the change that Ms. Haynes recommended, the clerk, because I treat the clerk like a department, and that is a department.
Personnel system, administrative code. These are kind of just all the duties that the city manager does. 6.01 electors. So obviously you have to live in the city to be an elector. And of course, we run nonpartisan, and that's pretty much the case across the board with, I believe, all cities in the state of Florida. You don't know what parties they are?
Yeah, there were a few counties that were still doing elections but most all now have changed to nonpartisan.
So, and there's a good reason for that. It
Very
needs to
good
stay
reason.
that way. It needs to stay that way. All right. 603, conduct of elections.
And one thing, because I know some of you are fairly new to perhaps city boards and committees, is that Pinellas County is unique in that the supervisor of elections is actually willing to run the municipal elections. That is not always the case in different counties. Many cities run their own elections, but here the supervisor of election is willing to do that. So on the ballot, for example, during the year where we have the large elections, we only pay for our little bit on the ballot. The off years, which is one coming up, it seems like Seminole and St. Petersburg are on the same cycle, so we kind of split the price of the printing the ballots and things like that, and it's prorated based on our population, but there is a huge cost savings. But the biggest thing is the trained staff. I went through the recount, and I actually sat and watched that process. It was amazing to see them do it in the boxes of undercounts and the boxes of people who, the ballot, something was wrong with them, and everybody on the canvassing committee went through every single ballot and looked at it. And it was a process that not every city has a supervisor of elections. So I guess it was so well established when they did this charter that they actually put it in the charter that the supervisor of elections office would conduct it. It's the first charter I've ever seen where it had that in the charter.
Yeah, because we used to have elections in March. And it was,
Well, there's a reason why that was
happening in
changed.
November. It's like, why can't they do them at the same time?
That's why we
So
did it in November, because it was more state and national elections, and also economies of cost.
It was cost effective.
I
Yeah,
think the
it made much more
legislature's
sense.
trying to
Plus,
change
they
that
were already
again
going
this
to
year.
have national elections, so that, yeah, it
It
was
was
smart.
already out there.
And the past few years, the state legislature is trying to change that again. And I will tell you, and Erica will tell you, anything that they change that we're in conflict with, it's going to override our charter.
All righty, elections, elective, regular elections, city, what we discussed. Any thoughts there? Runoff, 45 days?
I know they recently, when they were electing the mayor in St. Pete, they had that because the two highest vote getters did not reach 50%, they had to have like a runoff. Do we
it's a
have that
tie.
in our election? or-
Only if it's a tie.
Your charter is a plurality,
Okay.
which means the highest vote getter. And the only time there's a runoff is if there are two seats open, that number 2 and 3 tie. Because if 1 and 2 tie, they would be in the office. So this charter your election is considered a plurality, not a majority. So we have seen people elected to the council here in Seminole with 20-something% of the vote.
True.
if you have
Sorry, I
six
didn't mean to
people
lie.
running- And a lot of people only vote for 1, they don't vote for 2. And so it is a plurality.
It's called a bullet ballot. Just vote for 1 instead of 2. I used to encourage that when I was running. Just make sure you just vote for me, though. I think that backfired a couple of times. Anyway, all right. Uncontested, just need no one can just take the spot. Transition schedule. No thoughts there. Adoption of amendments.
Where are you?
Oh, I'm sorry, 7.02 now.
Just to go back to
Yep.
6.04D,
Oh, my.
just to back up what I had been saying, tie vote, in the case of a tie vote which affects the outcome of the election, there shall be a runoff election to determine the winner. So that's why the second meeting in November, my guess is, was established.
Adoption of amendments. Okay. Going into Article 8, ordinances and resolutions in general. This gives you definition what an ordinance is and what a resolution is. Okay, I'll just give you guys a little time, then I'll just move on. Stop me.
That works.
Okay? Section, yep.
Can I just
Yeah.
go back real quick to
Yeah.
the typo thing? Or 6.04, I guess. You said that the reason they put the meeting at the second in case there is a tie, that they have to have a runoff.
That is my suspicion. I can't
Okay.
say because I wasn't here.
But if the runoff can
They
be
have up to
held not
45
later than
days.
45 days, if it's possible it could take place after the meeting, the second meeting of the month. I'm
Which means they would retain the current vice mayor unless the vice mayor was up for election. And in that instance, they would nominate a vice mayor, probably which already sitting on council, and then they would already have a quorum of 5 and be able to run that next runoff
I
election.
suspect they would go ahead and appoint a vice mayor because it's typically not going to be the person
First
who was
come,
just
right.
elected.
It's traditionally been the person who got elected on their second year. That's how
They're
it had
getting
been
ready
in
to
the
run
past,
again, yeah.
Well, and there's also a catch-all provision within the charter that says at any time, the council may elect a new vice mayor, so.
Good point. All right,
You,
8:02.
Okay, I've got to go
Procedure.
check.
I'm gonna try to go to 8 o'clock. to be fair. I don't want to keep you guys here all night.
Well, you're doing great, Mr. Chairman.
You could
All right,
probably get through this with
I
Sean.
told you so.
You
It's all
did. You
done.
did say that.
I've done this. Okay. Procedure, any thoughts or questions there? These are pretty standard. Emergency ordinances.
I have one there.
Yep, on emergency?
Yes.
Okay, what's that?
Part C says, an emergency ordinance may be adopted with or without amendment or rejected at the meeting at which it is introduced, but the affirmative vote of at least 5 council members shall be required. And then part 804, disaster emergencies, it states that if there are, the way I interpreted it was that if there was not a quorum, if there were, like, if you did not have the 5, an executive order could be issued. And it said that would be continue no longer until such time as at least 4 members of the council were present. But if you only have 4 present, you don't have your 5 needed.
Yeah, that's gotta be for a
I
pretty
think, and I'm
serious
gonna throw
storm.
this out for the city attorney to say if I'm right or not, because we actually had to do the disaster declaration. I believe that they are just, I did emergency ordinances. We had some crazy issues with utility service areas in another life I had, and we would do an emergency ordinance to beat another city so we could do something else. And so the emergency ordinance had nothing to do with the disaster element.
Okay.
And so my question to the city attorney would be, is there a distinction? Because the disaster emergency would be an ordinance unto itself, where an emergency ordinance may be, I can't imagine what it would be, but would not be disaster related.
I mean, I think that's a good take on it. There's also a difference here too. When you're talking about an executive order that's basically being ratified, and then the other one you're talking about an emergency ordinance. So I think there's 2 distinctions. One is an emergency ordinance that it says a public emergency affecting life, health, property, and public peace, which may not be related to a natural disaster.
Okay.
You know, it could be a riot, it could be an active shooter within the community, something like that, which is not a natural disaster.
But could a disaster fall under an emergency ordinance? Because it would affect life, health, property. I just want to make sure it's not 4 votes in one place and 5 votes in another, that it's consistent
Well,
if it is the same action.
And and again, there's 2 separate things that are being talked about
Okay.
here. One is the adoption of an ordinance. The other one is an executive order.
Okay.
It says shall have the power to issue executive orders, proclamations, and regulations. So, I mean, I can look at it a little bit more, but I don't think that there's a real conflict
Okay, I
there.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
Right,
good
and we
point.
did use this section when Irma came through, but of course we had a full council. But if we hadn't, we would have used that section.
And I'm pretty sure there's a statute that also allows for like a waiver of certain requirements for local governments when it pertains to an emergency disaster. And it lists the types of disasters that there can be executive orders, or the city manager can
And
even
it waives a
make.
lot of my requirements for
Yes.
purchasing and financing.
Budget,
So if
yeah.
I need to go out and do front end loaders and hire people to do something, I can
Generators.
do it without going through any of the procedures outlined here or by ordinance.
Yep.
But then as soon as the emergency's over with, the council rescinds that.
So I'll take a look at 803 and 804, read them together, and see if maybe there might be a better way to clarify them, or if as they are.
Emergency shall be deemed as a matter imminently threatening public health, safety, or welfare in the nature of flooding, hurricane, tornado, public riot, chemical discharge, or similar physical nature, natural or man-made circumstances. So it's kind of
Broad.
emergency.
It's broad.
Yeah.
And I think the reason it is so broad is so, you know, and especially as things change, a charter is not super flexible. Ordinances are fairly flexible. And so I think this is, because it's built into the charter, it's giving a wide breadth of what can be considered an emergency. So I mean, I think that's a good point. I'll read them together and see if there's any other clarification that might need to be made, or if it's something that we can combine, or some suggestions for you.
That'd be for next meeting.
It'll be on the next meeting agenda.
All right. Any other thoughts on 803 and 804 since we kind of got into those? 805, authentication, recording, and disposition of charter amendments. Okay. Fiscal management procedures, section 901, budget adoption. This is pretty state regulated. We can't really make any changes unless there's something in the verbiage that disturbs or bothers anyone. I guess you're not gonna make many
Right,
changes
and
on
whoever
that.
did the charter was right in putting budget procedure based on Florida statute, because the statute number doesn't change, but over the years, the procedures have. And so that makes it
Covers all.
responsible to charter review.
Right. Function of city council. I can't remember last time we borrowed money. Any thoughts there? Okay. Total indebtedness shall not exceed 10% of the last certified assessed taxable value of all real estate property located in the city. I don't think we ever have that problem, but just as a point of order. Charter amendment, section 10.01. That's us. Any thoughts? All right, 10.02. Electors of city may propose amendments to Florida statute.
I was gonna say, a lot of this is governed by state law too, so.
I mean, there's not a lot unless there's something in here, but this is also everything we've already done. 5-year. Oh my goodness. Don't say it's over.
1003.
That one I do have a question.
Oh, 10, you got someone
That's
else
us.
there?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's us.
Yeah.
And it was a mess
Yes.
electing us, so
Yes,
Oh,
we definitely
I
need
think
to.
there was some ways that they had done it in the past that was never really clarified in the way that the charter review committee was selected. It wasn't written down. Because it says appoint, and then I saw everybody voting on it. And from what I understand, the way they have always done it was that each council member appointed one. If that person chose after a while, was agreed, then said, no, I couldn't do it, that council member gets to choose another person. What I saw here was they had alternates and it should have been voted on. I don't like that person, I disagree. I didn't see that happening prior. And maybe that's why a couple people had stepped down, because of the conflict. So I think the way I understood it, the way it had always been before, is it should be clarified that each council member chooses who they want on the charter review committee. If that person chooses not to participate or something comes up and they can't, that council member gets to choose another one of their own. No alternates, no voting, other than, yes, this is our charter review committee. And they just vote by consensus saying, yes, this is our charter review committee. Because what I saw in the council meeting was atrocious. People were saying yay, and then they were calling for another vote, and the poor city attorney, I guess it was Jay, was sitting there going, no, you can't do that. It's like, okay, what just happened? And the whole order went out the window.
If
It
I
was
could-
like a free-for-all.
Oh, Chairman
yes, I'm
recognizes
sorry.
those
I'm
two.
ordering my dinner. What's up?
Are you gonna order it for all of us?
No.
You are our leader, you need to.
You can enjoy watch what I'm gonna have, but anyway, what?
Well, no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, who determined the way it was going to be run as far as the councilmen were going to choose a person and they were also going to choose an alternate? Who decided that that's the way they were gonna do it?
That was the consensus of the council.
Yeah, that's something that's been done for quite a while, I believe.
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm
Yeah,
not.
it has.
So
it's
if you don't have an
If you didn't have
alternate,
an alternate, then you went to, so everyone pretty much except I think one didn't get their alternate in time. So what they did, they went to the next person's. I think that's what they did this time, did they?
Well, actually, there were two council members.
Okay.
One had put an alternate in, and the alternate was not able to do it. So there was 2 alternates short. One person was an alternate on 2 lists, so we were down to 4 alternates. And the person who was the alternate on 2 lists is who ultimately the motion was made and seconded. I can't tell you if that's how it was done in the past or not, but that was brought up and everybody agreed to do that.
I think the problem with what I heard at the council meeting is that if the alternates are chosen from someone that didn't have an alternate, because they didn't need one, and other council members had other alternates, that gave them 2 seats on the Charter Review Committee versus each council member got their own person that they wanted to be sitting here.
Might I make
Yes.
an inquiry? Other boards and committees within the city, how are they if they are appointed by the council, is it typically done? By application and then the
Well-
council does it together?
There is a 2 different processes.
Okay.
Bernie, for example, is on the Development Review Board. That is a very structured appointment process. We have to advertise in the newspaper, and they are interviewed by the Development Review Board, and then they are forwarded to the city council for an interview, and then the city council selects. Are not very many openings on our boards and committees.
Okay.
Now, I know Ms. PG serves on the tree committee. As far as I know, the membership of that committee hasn't changed in years. I know it hasn't changed since I've been here.
No.
And I don't know how but the tree committee and the development review board are the only 2 committees I think that are included in an ordinance that tells how to do it. All of our committees, we advertise in the newspaper, and then they submit their names, and then our first round of interviews is with the committee that they would serve on, and then the next round of interviews is with the city council. So that's just how it has been done with those committees in the past, but to my knowledge, that has never been, from what I've been told, how the Charter Review Committee has been selected.
So those might be different ways that you could put a process in here of how this committee could be selected if otherwise it's part of the council's determination, much like you were talking about earlier with if we let them come up with this procedure for filling the vacancy for the vacant council position, then it could be different every time. This is kind of the same scenario, so it may be prudent to think of other ways to do that, either the way that it's been done, but now we're going to kind of clarify it and see if we can get it in the charter so there's a set process to be done.
Or require them to do a process by
Correct.
resolution.
By
that would be
resolution
in
that,
effect prior
just
to
like we're
the-
doing with the vacancy and seeing if we can do that.
I think the Charter Review Committee is a little different, only because they only meet once every 5 years. So it's not like Bernie's on a continual type of committee, and me as well, on being on the tree committee. So I think it's just a little bit different, so.
Right, and what I'm just saying is maybe those are alternatives because charter review committees in other communities are selected in various different processes that are unlike how this was done. But whatever process is used, I think it would be a good idea to do kind of what you guys have suggested with the filling the vacancy of the term limit, to require the council to make a resolution
Before
they appoint on how they are going to do it, so maybe it doesn't run into the issues that they were having this last go round, and keep maybe more consistency, in the selection of this and other committees,
Yeah, and so that it doesn't end up in the Seminole Beacon, which was very disturbing. Very disturbing. I was embarrassed for our city.
My one suggestion is if we do whatever we suggest to them, if they choose to do it similar for the next one, have them give their first, second, and if necessary, third choice all at once. Because that way, if the first one can't do it, we already have someone and we're not having to come back to the board or have the council and have them vote again. They can immediately just go to their second choice and have them on there. If the council approves this slate with your first, second, and third choice.
Okay, but there's 2 different things. That would be their resolution. As a charter, as a citizen, you could come and speak that night. As a charter review committee, do you want to memorialize the process in your charter? Or do you want just simply to compel the city council to have a process
Right.
in advance of
Absolutely.
that
And they can
selection?
choose whatever
And then they would
process
have
that
to
they
choose it.
want to
But
have done.
anybody wanting to serve or anybody, the deliberations, then you would have a guideline to go by. And as a member of the public, you could comment when they adopt that resolution, saying yes or no on that.
We definitely need a process.
I think
Oh, yeah.
I think the resolution.
Even if they come up with it, yes, it was.
So a similar procedure as what you have determined would like to be done for the vacancy in a council seat is that the council would adopt a resolution prior to appointment of the committee, setting out the procedure with which they are going to use to appoint the committee.
With all contingencies are covered.
Yeah.
And that
Well, yeah, but
To the best of their
from a
ability.
legal, I was gonna say, from a legal point of view, when you say something like all contingencies,
Well,
now you're
to the
talking
best of their
about,
ability.
Well, and that resolution would be in effect
Yeah.
until changed in the same way it was adopted.
Correct.
Yep, that's fine. Let's do that.
That would be for A, then everything else is assumed included.
See, that would be
Oh, I thought we were done.
1003A.
Any other thoughts on, 'cause that's pretty much the last of
I
it?
think it's time to go home.
Yeah, we got a couple more things. Okay, so we have gone through the charter. We have a couple items to follow up on the next meeting.
So I have listed, Mr. Chairman,
Uh-huh.
that, that the city attorney, I love it when I get to say the city attorney will do this, will do verbiage on, the immediately before qualifying being a resident and maintaining residencies. And I guess the only question I would have is, can that be in the same item, or would that be the dual item? Would that have to be two separate amendments?
I think that can be the same, it can just be
Okay.
redlined.
Well, just
Yeah,
however you do it,
yeah.
And then the other would be the second business meeting in November for the selection of the vice mayor to make it conform with the reorganization meeting. That the council will by resolution establish a process for selecting, or for filling, that should be for filling a vacancy on the city council. The word filled is a Scrivener's error, and you will confirm that we don't need an amendment for that. And the last thing is a resolution for the Charter Review Committee selection process, requiring the city council to have one of those in place. You also are going to look at section point 8.03 and 8.04 for the next meeting.
And there's also some discussion on the term limits. I think you're gonna do.
Term limits
bring
for
back some-
next
some
meeting.
things.
She would
But I don't
not
have anything to do with that.
my
And then
next question would
also,
be-
section 308, just removing direction by city council, so to
Yes.
just read city manager, charter, or state law.
Correct.
John?
Yes.
Did I hear that you were going to bring up a suggestion? Or was this the place about the rules of order or potentially professionalism or behavior on the city council?
Civility.
The civility.
Yeah, civility, a lot of cities are incorporating that now.
Yeah, I think we can, I think did we discuss that? Is there a way is that something that could be in the charter, or is that something more of a resolution?
It's, I've not seen it as an ordinance. I've mostly seen it as a resolution or a pledge that's taken by the council or commission members. Something that's prominently placed somewhere, or otherwise an administrative thing. I can see if it can be done in the form of an ordinance, or if it can be embedded within the charter.
I'll let you take a look at
Yeah,
that. All right.
yeah, let me look at that
That'll
before
give us
I,
something else to do.
I have a feeling I know the answer, but I don't
I
want to
know
go on
more
a
and more
feeling.
communities are adopting that, but.
How they're
It
adopting
may be
it.
more of a resolution item, but
maybe.
the city attorney, I have every confidence she'll
We
be
can
able
still
to.
suggest them.
I know that
That's
one of your
of course.
cities have done it, because Jay mentioned to me that
Mm-hmm.
one of the cities that you work for has done that.
Several have, some of them abide by them, some don't.
And then we'll,
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
the only question I have is from a staff perspective, and I will let you know if there's anything that you as a body would like staff to research for you. If you tell us specifically what that is, we'll be happy to do that. I know the city attorney is doing a lot of the legalese, but, for example, you mentioned term limits. If there's any information you wanted us to gather on term limits for you to be distributed, then just let us know what that is, and we'll be happy to get that to you prior to your next meeting.
All right. Other business, next item on the agenda. Any other business? What else?
Skip again, that was my other business.
Oh, all right, well then you've already jumped ahead. All right, the next item is the charter review meeting schedule. Our next meeting, which is a public meeting, will be April 1st, April Fool's Day. And then after that, April 22nd, that might be even if necessary. And then May 6th and May 13th if needed. It's plausible. I don't want to jinx it, we might be
Yeah,
done next
let's
meeting.
knock on wood.
Maybe, it depends on how efficient our city attorney is.
Oh.
I gotta put that on you, so if we go further, then I'm not taking the blame.
And if I
I'll
may
take
make
it.
a comment about our city's charter, our city's a very young charter compared to a lot of other cities, so you don't have a lot of the cleanup you have to do from older charters with things that have just become obsolete, et cetera. So, you know, I don't feel like you're not doing your job because you didn't make a lot of changes because this is a new charter. And the past 2 charter review committees ago, 1 or 2, I think made about 8 changes. So they captured a lot of things, but now you've caught a couple of things that they didn't capture. And so eventually, unless things change, you may work yourself out of a job, you know. But because you do meet every 5 years, it does. It's a fairly current document. It's a new document. It's current. So don't feel bad that you're not recommending a lot of changes because that is not untypical in a charter that has been well written to start with.
That's why it's good to have new blood all the time. You never know what ideas are gonna come out of brains.
That's right.
There are a lot of brilliant people out there.
With that,
Motion to adjourn?
there it is.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Seeing none, unanimous. See you guys.